In the 1980s, three unlikely automotive forces collided, and that collision created a car that nobody really asked for, but Buick built anyway. First of them was that Buick at the time was battling its own image, long seen as the brand of retirees and country club parking lots. It desperately wanted to shake off its old man's car reputation, and bold, youthful design was needed. Second, GM's internal design studios were fuming. Cadillac had just snubbed them all by outsourcing their new Alante model to an Italian design house. GM's designers were determined to show the higher-ups that brilliance didn't need an Italian passport. They could craft something just as daring right here at home. And third was the market was shifting towards a new kind of status symbol, the personal luxury coupe. These weren't muscle cars or family sedans. They were stylish, two-door statements of taste and comfort. Buick knew it needed its own contender, something distinctive and modern that would stand out from an increasingly crowded market. And out of this convergence came a car that broke from Buick tradition, a sleek two-seat Grand Tourer, the first of its kind for the brand, and it was called the Buick Reatta. And as you'll soon see why, it was also the last time Buick tried anything like this. As mentioned before, in the wake of the Alante design decision, GM's Advanced Design 2 studio held an internal contest to envision a new two-seater. The winning concept came from Dave McIntosh around 1982, a clean, rounded design that would evolve into the Reatta when it officially launched in 1988. The next 6 years, though, between concept and production were anything but smooth. Turning the Reatta from sketch to streetcar meant wrestling with GM's existing hardware. Originally designed for full-size coupes like the Riviera, the E-body was a decent platform, but it was far from sporty. It was also designed mainly for cars that looked like bricks, where the Reatta looked more like a football, which represented some serious challenges in turning it into a production car. But they had no choice. To save costs, the Reatta would have to ride on that same E-body structure, but to get it to fit, they would need to get creative from a design and engineering perspective. Drawing inspiration from contemporary European sports cars, particularly Porsche, they added sharp side creases and a smooth tail panel, plus a stretched nose to balance out the profile of the Reatta. Designers Irv Rybicki and Ted Polak reworked the shape, trimming the bulky front overhang and pushing the nose just far enough forward to give the Reatta a sleek stance. The Reatta looked like if you took any quintessentially 80s angular coupe and just rounded off the edges with a belt sander. The angular idea was still there, but as a whole it was a lot more slippery. It wasn't screaming for attention necessarily, but it wasn't immune to garnering it either. But while the Reatta looked slippery on the outside, it was something else entirely on the inside. It was boxy, yet surprisingly high-tech. Digital gauges came standard, but the real showstopper was the touchscreen. Yes, a touchscreen. Long before tablets and smartphones were a part of daily life, the Reatta featured a dash-mounted CRT display that handled just about everything. Climate control, audio settings, and even basic engine diagnostics. First introduced in the '86 Riviera, the system was refined for the Reatta, and it felt like something out of the future. Now, this wasn't a fast or responsive touchscreen by any means, but for the time, it might as well have been a NASA computer. And the dashboards of the early Reattas really also ended up looking like mission control, because the entire gauge section was just one big rectangular block of screens that met with another rectangular block coming from the transmission tunnel. The door panels and the rear parcel shelf had some nice curvature to them, so it beats me as to why Buick went for such a blocky dash, as it seems to be the polar opposite of the rest of the car's design language. For a two-seater though, the Buick Reatta was surprisingly comfortable and well-appointed. The cabin was spacious, with wide, supportive seats for long-distance cruising, and plenty of legroom to stretch out. It also packed some impressive tech and safety for the 80s. Four-wheel anti-lock disc brakes, and a fully independent suspension. Up front, it used coil springs and McPherson struts, and in back, transverse leaf springs kept things light and compact. On paper and in person, it looked like a sleek, agile coupe, and it mostly delivered. In testing, Car and Driver recorded 0.79 Gs of lateral grip in 1988, which wasn't bad for a front-wheel drive car then, and handling as a whole was pretty decent, but the overall driving experience, well, that told a more complicated story. Car and Driver's official statement on the car, courtesy of their review from Rich Sepos, said that the Reatta is nearly viceless, and also nearly soulless. It wasn't a bad car statistically, it just wasn't a car that would excite. Under the hood sat Buick's familiar 3.8-liter V6, specifically the LN3 variant. It was a reliable engine equipped with fuel injection and a balance shaft for smoother operation, but it wasn't exactly cutting edge or fast. It made 165 horsepower at 4,400 RPM and 210 foot-pounds of torque at just 2,000 RPM. Paired with an automatic transmission and weighing in at about 3,400 pounds, the Reatta could manage 0 to 60 in about 9.1 seconds, which, for a car aiming to compete with the European heavyweights, wasn't really enough. In theory, Buick had the right idea, a smaller, more affordable American answer to the European Grand Tourer. But the execution fell short. By the time the Reatta launched in 1988, Mercedes, for example, had already moved on to much larger, more powerful engines, 4.2 liters and up. Buick had matched what Mercedes was doing 5 years earlier rather than anticipating where the segment was heading. And worse still, the Reatta wasn't just fighting imported rivals, it was also competing with Cadillac's Elante under the GM umbrella, which hit the market a year earlier in 1987. Originally, the Reatta was pitched as a $20,000 premium coupe, a bargain compared to the $50,000 Mercedes or $50,000 Elante. But by the time it hit the showrooms, the sticker read closer to $25,000, and it kept on climbing. By 1981, a base Reatta coupe cost over $29,000, and if you wanted the convertible, that was another $5,000. For a car that was meant to undercut the luxury elite, the Reatta wasn't just starting to feel underpowered, but also overpriced. Buick's approach at cutting the price tag at the expense of performance just wasn't enough to draw in customers. According to Car and Driver in 1988, Buick's goal was to sell 15,000 Reattas per year. In 4 years of production, they managed to sell about 21,000. Ouch. They simply could not pull buyers in to match Mercedes. In 1981, they sold about 7,000 Reattas, which was still well under the roughly 9,000 Mercedes-Benz SLs that sold that year at a much higher price point. By 1990, Buick had introduced the long-promised Reatta Convertible, but even with the added chassis bracing, it lacked the structural rigidity of the coupe. The first year's soft top was also a manual, which was a curious oversight in a car that leaned so heavily on high-tech features. Why an automated top wasn't fitted, I don't know. In 1991, they did add a power assistant mechanism and a hard tonneau cover to hide that folded roof, but the damage was done. With a $5,000 premium over the coupe, convertible sales never really took off. And just like that, their sleek, high-tech two-seater quietly bowed out of the automotive arms race. It's probably one of the strangest cars Buick ever made, and while their execution of it was not great by any means, we do have to give them credit for at least trying to make something different, even if it missed the mark. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any personal stories or experiences related to the Reatta. But otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps me out. But I will see you all next time, enthusiasts.